Hello everybody and welcome to our 10th lesson in our series on Byzantine chant. My name is Chris Kulvukis and I am the protopsaltis at St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church in Seattle, Washington, and I'm looking forward to teaching you a little bit today. Now remember, if you'd like to reach out and you have any specific questions on these lessons, or if you'd just like to reach out and try to schedule some one-on-one private lessons, you can go ahead and do so at the email that I'm going to leave in the video description. Now let's go ahead and get this going. So today we are going to talk about flats, sharps, and characters of quality, which we have not talked about at all yet. So that should be pretty fun to get into that. Let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the flat, or in Greek, we call it the Ifesi. Now what it does, just like in Western music, it brings the pitch down slightly for whatever character it resides on. So here it resides on the oligo. We see that we are starting on ni with this ison. We're going to move up one here to pa, but the pa is going to be slightly lower because of this ifesi. So it would sound like this. Ni, ni pa vuga. So you heard that the pa, instead of sounding like a normal pa like this, ni, ni, ni pa vuga, ni pa vuga, we make it lower. Ni pa vuga, ni pa vuga. So it's just a little bit lower than it would normally be. And here we have a little table with different flats, different types of ifesis, and you'll see the main difference is how many lines are going through that line that we have going down to the left. And with each line, we are making the flat go down just a little bit more. All right, so this one is just -2 moria, which remember is the moria are the measurements that we use for how to distinguish how far one note is from the next, the different intervals. So normally, ni to pa would be 12 moria, but here, since we have this ifesia there, it is going to be 10 instead. So it's just a little bit lower, a little bit flat. All right. Now let's look at what this would look like in an example. So, ni, 1, 2, ready. Ni pa vuga di ke zo ke ni ga vu pa ni. So you hear that zo was lower than we normally would sing it, all right, because of this ifesi on there. Now let's look at the opposite, a diesi, or a sharp. So diesi is the Greek name for this, all right? And what it does is it does the opposite of the ifesi. It brings the pitch up slightly, and it resides under whatever character of quantity it is going to be affecting. So here we see the martyria of vu, so we're starting on vu here. Ni pa vu. And normally, if we did not have this diesi here, it'd be vuga di ke. But since we have a diesi, this ga is going to be a bit higher than usual. So ni pa vu vuga di ke. So you heard that ga is higher than it normally would be. And once again, just like with the ifesis, with the diesis, we have different versions, and depending on which version, some are going to be a little bit higher than others. All right? So, let's look at an example here. Ni, 1, 2, 3. Ni pa vu ga di. Vuga vu pa vu ni. Ni pa vu pa ni zo ni. So you'll notice that here we had between ni, zo, ni, we had that zo sharped. This can be interpreted in different ways, also depending on which tone you're in. Sometimes you'll hear chanters from Greece doing it so that this zo, it doesn't even change. It stays on ni, right? Because it's such a small interval. But that will be up to you to do some listening and kind of understand what that's supposed to sound like. All right? So let's move on to the characters of quality now. So this is something completely new that we really haven't talked about. And the characters of quality are expressive characters that are placed before or under characters of quantity. Now, what these do is they're going to help us interpret how we are going to sing the melodies that we are reading on the page. So a lot of them are going to be ornamental qualities, or some of them are going to be accented, right? And here we have a list of the most common and important ones that we are going to need to learn in order to interpret them properly in Byzantine chant. We have the characters which represent accents, which are called the psiphiston and the varia. And then we have the ornamental characters called the Antikenoma, the Omalon, and the Sindesmos. Now, that's not to say that these so-called accent characters cannot be interpreted as ornamental as well, because there are ornaments that go with them, but in general, they're going to be more for accenting certain parts of the melody, whereas these are just going to be strictly lots of ornaments, or as they're called in Greek, yirismata. All right? Now, before we get into this, I just want to say that in this little short video that we have, it is not going to be an exhaustive list of all the ways that you can interpret these different characters of quantity. There are many, 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 many different ways that you can interpret all of these characters, and the best way to learn is to do some listening, all right? If you're not fortunate enough to be learning from a chanter in your home parish that knows how to interpret these and that has learned from another master themselves, you're going to need to go to YouTube, type in some hymns that you like in Greek, which I'll link to some in the video description if you're not sure what to type in. And then you need to follow along with the score and look at these characters of quantity and listen how the chanters interpret them. It is very much a listened thing, and you kind of just absorb as you continue to listen. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say is don't go away from this lesson thinking, okay, now I know how to interpret all of these. We're only going to scratch the tip of the iceberg here, all right? So make sure that you go and you listen. It is very much a listening art. It is an oral tradition initially, right? So that part of it is still very important. And if you want to get even deeper into the ornamental characters that we're going to be looking at here, I highly recommend this book that I've got right here. It's called Byzantine Chant, The Received Tradition, written by John Michael Boyer, who's one of the leading chant experts here in the United States. And it has one of the most in-depth sections on ornamentation that I have ever found in a chant book. All right, so I'll link to that in the description as well if you want to check it out. All right, so let's start looking at some of these characters. So first we have the psiphiston, all right, and these are some of the accented characters, the psiphiston and the varia, the two that are the accented characters. So starting with the psiphiston, it is written below the characters of quantity that are on accented syllables. So a lot of the times when we're speaking, right, different syllables of our words are accented. They have, let's say, an emphasis. If I said the word emphasis, I wouldn't say emphasis, unless I was just messing around, right? Emphasis is on the first syllable. So if we had that word, let's say, in a Byzantine chant text, then we would see a psiphiston maybe on the first syllable of that word. It really is just used to emphasize different syllables. And it is always followed by two characters of descent. And then we have the varia, which looks like this, written before a character of quantity. And when we see this, the following character is sung with a mild emphasis. Now, both of these come with ornamental qualities as well, which we're not going to get too deep into here. What you really just need to focus on right now is that they are accented. All right? So let's see what they look like in an example. So here we see the varia. As you can see, it is written before the ison, and it's going to make that ison emphasized just slightly. And we have a bunch of them written here. And then we have the psiphiston right here, written on the ison. This ison is going to be accented. Same thing here. Now we also see some psiphiston here and here, where it is on characters that where we have the kendimata and the oligon one on top of each other. So if we see the kendimata on the bottom and the psiphiston the oligon on the top, then we know the psiphisto belongs to the oligon, all right? But if we see the kedimata on top, that means that we're going to sing the kedimata with a little bit more stress on that than we normally would. Because remember, the kedimata usually are only on unstressed syllables. So this is a kind of way that we can bring them out a little bit more if we see a psiphiston on the bottom here. And there are also ornamental ways to bring those out. If you want to learn more about those, buy this book that I mentioned, contact me for private lessons so we can go over that in more detail, all right? So, here's what this example would sound like. Ni, ni pavugadi, diga gavu vo papani, ni zoke di. Kezoni pani pavu gavu pa vugadi keni gali di gavu pa vupani. So you'll hear all of those. I tried to really emphasize those accents so that you can get an idea of what it should sound like, all right? So now we're going to move on to some of these more ornamental characters, all right? So first we're going to talk about the Antikenoma, which looks like this. It is written below characters of quantity, and it is always followed by a descending character. Now we see the Antikenoma in two situations, which I've written here. Underneath an oligo on the rhythmic beat arsi. So remember, arsi is up when we're going down, up, 1, 2, thesi, arsi, right? When we're in the meter of 2, or in any meter when we have an up. In which case we do a little flip of the voice. So kind of like what we learned about the petasti, we do a little and then we also will see it underneath an oligo, petastio, or apostrophos together with an apli. So you'll see that on the next, not on the next slide, but in the slide after that, you'll see that. And followed by an apostrophos with a gorgo, in which case we do a little wave with the voice. We do a little So we'll talk about that as when we get to the example. You'll kind of see what that sounds like, all right? So here's an example of some of these Antikenoma. All right, so we've got this one right here, this one right here. You see they're both underneath the ison. So what that means is this ison, we're going to have a little flip of our voice. Same thing here. All of these will have a little flip. Ni. 1, 2, ready. Ni pa vuga di kani ga di ga vuga pa vu pa ni. So you'll hear that on some of these faster ones with the orgo. We don't necessarily have as much time to do a full flip, but we can do a little wave, let's say, with our voice. So let's look at one more example here. So this is what we were talking about a couple slides previous with the Antikenoma that has the apli in the middle. And this is where we do that little wave of our voice. Ni, ni. It's like it goes down, then up, then back onto the pitch, all right? And I will say that that is not the only way to interpret these. Once again, go listen to some recordings, follow along with the score. When you see this specific symbol, listen to what the chant is doing, and you'll find lots of different ways to do it. But that is the way that I was taught by my teacher, all right? So, ni. So here's what this example would sound like. 1, 2, 3, and ni zo ni pa vu ga di ga vu pa ni. So lots of little subtle movements there. All right? Let's get on to the next ornamental character we have, which is the Omalon. Another character with many, many different ways to interpret it. But generally, what you need to know is that it signifies a little flip with our voice. So it's written underneath one character with a klasma, so it's over the course of 2 beats, or in between 2 characters of quantity that have equal rhythmic value, where the second character is an ison. So here, that's what you see an example of. You see an oligon and an ison as the second character. So 2 characters here that are both 1 beat each, and they have the Omalon written in between them. And here, in the book that we're taken from, it is characterized as, let's say we had ni, pa, ni, ah, 1, 2, ah, ni, pa, ni. So that's one way we can interpret this, all right? So, let's look at an example here. So you'll see, just to go over it for a second, you'll see that, of course, we have the Omalon, and it lasts over the course of 2 different characters that are the same rhythmic value, and the second one is an ison here. So we can go like this. Ni, 2, 3, 4. Ni, ni, zo, ni, pa, ni, pa, vu, ga, di, ga, ga, vu, vu, pa, pa, ni, zo, ni, pa, ni. So you'll hear at the end I did a bit of a different interpretation of the Omalon. There's lots of different interpretations. I keep saying that. Just go ahead and find some recordings so that you can listen and try to find different ways to interpret these characters of quality. All right? Cool. Let's move on to the next one. Characters of quality continued. We have the Sindesmos. Okay, so the Sindesmos is the last one that we'll look at today. And it connects 2 characters of quantity, and it signifies a light flip of the voice over the course of the 2 characters. So once again, we have 2 characters here, just like in the Omalon, where we are connecting them with the Sindesmos. And what it means is we do a little flip with our voice over the course of the 2 characters. Now you might think, well, isn't that the exact same as the Omalon? Yes, here it is drawn out in a similar way. But of course, when you listen to chanters who have really mastered these ornaments, interpret these characters, it's not going to sound the same. All right, so you got to do some listening. You've got to follow along with the scores. You've got to make sure that you really understand the different ways that all of these can be interpreted. So let's look at an example here. So you'll see that here we have the Sindesmos, which is connecting this ison and these 2 characters here, the ison with the kendimata. And this is actually a very common way that you're going to see the Sindesmos written out. It's going to have a character here that's 1 beat, and then it's going to have an ison with the kendimata that are written out. And there are different ways to interpret this, but I will show you one of the most common ways that I've heard and that I have learned from my teachers. All right, so we've got ni, 1, 2, 3, and ni, pa, vu, pa, vu, ga, di, ga, di, ke, so, ke, zoni, pani, zoni, zo, ke, zo, ke, di, ke, li, ga, di, ga, vu, ga, vu, pa, ni, ni, zo, ni. All right, and that is one way of many ways that you can interpret the Sindesmos. So, those are the characters that we're going to look at today. Now, how do you learn these? I've mentioned this already in this lesson, but just as a reminder, get up to the chant stand, especially if you have someone that is very experienced and has many years of chanting under their belt, and they have learned from someone that is a master of chanting, and you can just absorb those ornaments from them. Listen to recordings of professional chanters, especially the Greeks, right? And then also I just want to say, enjoy the journey of learning these, because it is certainly a journey. It's not going to be a thing where you look at it and then a week later you're like, okay, I'm the master of all these ornamentations. No, it is going to take you a very long time, because once you think you've heard all of the different ways that you can ornament something, you're going to hear another way, all right? So it's kind of a bottomless pit that we've got. So enjoy the journey, take your time, just try to be grateful for all of these different beautiful ways that we have to sing in our church, all right? And that is going to be it for today. So thank you so much for joining me on this lesson. If you're finding value in these lessons, subscribe to the channel. Of course, like the video, hit the bell notification so that you know when the next videos are coming out. And I will see you in the next video.